The sea was endless, a flat blue mirror that swallowed hope one sunrise at a time. The ship, the Revenant, drifted without wind, without food, without mercy. Salt crusted their lips and their tongues felt like rope. The last of the bread had turned to dust. The water barrels, long dry. Voices once filled with laughter now rasped in whispers. A man counted the stars, hoping one might guide them to land. Another tore a strip of leather from his boot and chewed it in silence. 6 months. That's how long they had floated on an ocean that gave nothing back. No storm. No port, no rescue. Only hunger and the sound of waves. Steady, cruel, eternal. And yet somehow these men lived. What kept them alive was not mercy nor luck, but the raw, unyielding will of those who defied the sea itself. For in the age of sails, death was never far. And nowhere was it closer than in the world of pirates, men who gambled their lives for gold, freedom, and a few stolen days beneath the sun. Pirates were feared for their brutality, but it wasn't always cannon fire that killed them. Sometimes it was the sea itself. For every raid, every legend of stolen gold, there were months spent adrift in silence. Storms could rip away supplies in hours. Sickness could claim a dozen men before sunrise, and when food and water ran out, the ocean became a slow executioner. The Revenant was no ordinary ship. Her crew had survived battles, hurricanes, and mutiny, but what came after the storm of 1719 would test them in ways no enemy ever had. Their food rotted. Their fresh water turned foul. Their maps were useless. The nearest port was a rumor carried by gulls. Still, they refused to surrender. No one remembers how many went in, or how many came out. Only that when the Revenant finally reappeared, the men aboard were no longer quite human, but they were alive. It began in the warm waters of the Caribbean, the heart of the Golden Age of Piracy. The Revenant had left Nassau in pursuit of a Spanish galleon rumored to carry silver from the New World. For weeks they hunted across the trade routes, chasing shadows on the horizon. Then came the storm, a monstrous squall that tore their sails to ribbons and swallowed their provisions whole. When the skies cleared, the sea was calm. Too calm. Their compass spun wildly and their navigation charts were gone. The world became endless water and sky. At first they rationed carefully. Every man got a crust of biscuit, a cup of rainwater when fortune allowed. They believed they'd find land within days, but the days stretched to weeks and the horizon never changed. That was when the true battle began. Not against ships or soldiers, but against time, thirst, and the slow decay of the human will. By the 3rd month, the sea turned against them. The sun no longer warmed and it burned. Deck planks split beneath their feet. Their shadows shrank until even those seemed to fade. The ship's stores were empty. The biscuit crumbs had long been scraped from the barrel. The last drop of fresh water had been fought over and lost. Salt sores blistered their skin. Lips cracked and bled. Some tried to drink the ocean only to collapse, retching foam. At night they heard things. The groan of the timbers, the whisper of the tide, the voices of men already gone. A madness began to creep through the crew like rot in the hull. A quarrel over a scrap of dried meat ended with blood on the deck. They buried neither body and the sea took both. The captain said nothing. His eyes, once bright as stormlight, dulled to gray. He stared toward a horizon that refused to change. It was then they understood. The ocean had trapped them in its blue eternity, and only their own invention could save them. So began the slow education of survival, not learned from books or charts, but carved into the flesh by thirst and time. Every man became a student of desperation, every heartbeat a bargain with the sea. And in that silence the lesson began. The first lesson of starvation is silence. Hunger steals words before it steals strength. The men of the Revenant learned to move without speech, to conserve even breath. They began by scraping every barrel, every crate, every forgotten corner. They boiled sawdust with seawater, hoping to trick their bodies into thinking it was food. The result was sickness, and yet they drank it anyway. When the rain finally came, it was salvation. They spread torn sails across the deck, catching every drop. For one night, laughter returned. They drank until their bellies ached, until they believed the worst was over. But the sea does not grant mercy twice. Days later, the sun returned fiercer than before, and the rainwater turned brackish. Then the quartermaster, Haynes, remembered the turtles. He had seen them surface at dawn, miles east of their drift. They cut loose the longboat and rowed through the glass-still water. Hours passed before the first shell broke the surface. They struck quick and hard, hauled two aboard and brought them back alive. For a week, turtle blood and meat kept them from collapse. They ate in silence, eyes half closed, pretending it was feast enough. Bones were dried and sharpened into hooks. Soon the crew turned hunters. They wove lines from frayed rope, dangled bait made of their own scars, and caught fish barehanded. The sea gave little but enough to taste hope. When storms rolled in again, they no longer cursed them. They raised their mouths to the sky and drank what they could. Some filled hollowed barrels. Others licked the deck dry. Every drop was life. Still, men began to vanish. The boatswain disappeared one night, leaving only footprints to the rail. Another jumped overboard at dawn, calling to something unseen beneath the waves. Hunger and fear had become twin captains. The captain, grim but steady, gathered the survivors. He ordered strict rations, 1 bite of fish, 1 sip of water per man per day. No exceptions. They obeyed. Discipline was the only thing left between them and the dark. By the 5th month, their faces had become masks of salt and bone. Yet beneath the ruin, a strange calm grew. They learned to read the sky, to predict the faint change of wind. They learned to catch rain by scent before it fell. They became creatures of the ocean, half mad, half divine. When provisions failed again, they turned to their ship itself. The candles melted down to wax, then to smoke. They burned the tallow for oil, dipped cloth strips to flavor boiling water. It stank, but it filled the gut. Some chewed rope fibers, others gnawed the soft wood around the gunwale. A few took to sucking on musket balls, pretending it eased thirst. Through it all, they kept the flag flying. It became less a symbol of defiance and more of memory, a reminder that they had once been men with purpose. Then came the miracle of the driftwood. One dawn, debris floated by, fragments of another ship carried by unseen currents. Among them, a cask sealed tight. They hauled it aboard, hearts pounding, praying for anything. Inside, hardtack, molded, sour, but real. They divided it into equal shares. Each man took a piece the size of a coin. They chewed it slowly, eyes closed, tears streaking through salt and grime. That night, the captain spoke for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow, he said, we find wind, and somehow the sea obeyed. By the next morning, a breeze stirred and faint but sure. The sails, patched and brittle, caught it. The Revenant moved again, creaking like an old beast waking from sleep. For the first time in months, they felt the ocean shift beneath them, not as a prison, but as a path. They steered east toward a rising sun they barely believed in. Their bodies were ghosts, their minds hollowed by the endless weight. But beneath all the ruin, a pulse remained. The simple, stubborn rhythm of men who refused to die. The sea, as if listening, began to stir. At first only ripples, then a sigh across the waves, soft, hesitant, alive. What they had prayed for through endless nights finally answered. Not with thunder, but with breath. The wind returned like a ghost, gentle, uncertain but alive. The sails filled with a sound that made every man stop. For weeks they had known only silence and the groan of dying wood. Now the sea whispered movement. The captain ordered the course east. Their compasses were dead, their charts destroyed. But instinct, that old pirate sense of direction born from storms and luck, guided him. They moved slowly at first, then faster, the current pulling them toward something unseen. Birds appeared on the horizon, gulls circling low, crying over the waves. Every sailor knew what that meant. Land. They rode through the last of their strength. Hands blistered, throats torn from shouting. The ship groaned like it was fighting its own death. At sunset, they saw it, a black ridge on the horizon, an island. A shape too solid to be illusion. When the Revenant scraped the shallows, men fell to their knees in the surf, kissing the sand. They drank from muddy pools, ate wild fruit with shaking hands, and wept openly under the rain. They had survived, but survival had changed them. The men who walked ashore were not the same as those who had left Nassau 6 months before. Their eyes carried the calm of those who had looked into the abyss and found a way to smile back. No one spoke of what they had done to live. No one dared. The sea had taken its due, and they had given it enough. When the Revenant finally limped back into port weeks later, the world stared in silence. Of the 50 men who had set sail, only 21 returned. And in their silence they carried the story that would never die. Time moved on. Empires rose, maps changed, and the sea swallowed 1,000 more ships, but whispers of the revenant remained. They drifted through taverns, through docks, through the mouths of sailors who swore the tale was true. Memory became rumor. Rumor became legend. Historians would later argue whether the tale of the revenant was truth or legend. Some said it was a myth born of fear. Others claimed they had seen the ship themselves, its hull bleached by the sun, its crew staring from the deck like phantoms. But the truth of it lives not in the details, not in how they caught fish, or how many days they drifted, but in what they became. Survival at sea was never a matter of luck. It was a conversation between man and the ocean, between hunger and will. And the men of the Revenant had answered with the only words that mattered: endurance, defiance, and faith in the wind. When asked how they lived, the captain said only this: we didn't. The sea let us borrow our lives back. That was enough. The captain's words faded into the sea air, carried away like smoke. In time, the world forgot their faces, their names, even the shape of their ship. But the ocean never forgets. Centuries have passed, and the ocean still holds its secrets. Ships vanish, storms swallow names, but every now and then sailors speak of a shadow on the horizon, a battered vessel with torn black sails. Moving against the wind, they call it the Revenant. Some say it's a ghost ship, cursed to sail forever as a warning to those who challenge the sea. Others say it's just a story, a fable whispered between waves. But for those who listen closely, when the night is calm and the stars are clear, the ocean still hums with their memory. The creak of a mast, the whisper of rope, the faint echo of voices that refuse to die. Because legends aren't written in ink or gold, they're carved into salt and silence. And the Revenant still sails, somewhere beyond the edge of the map. Proof that the sea never forgets.